Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Let's just give a moment for people to join in from the waiting room and we can start. All right, so welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today in this second co-design session. I want to give a warm welcome to everyone, and we are going to start with our agenda. Our agenda for today is a little bit different from the one of the last week. We are having a really short recap and review of what we did last week so that we can all remember that. And then we are moving on to a special section where Peja will be sharing with us a little bit about the experience of designing a dialogue, what a dialogue is and what it is not, and an overview of how our 5 weeks of dialogue will look like as we start early next year. After that, we'll be moving on to a specific look into the 5 weeks, into the content of the 5 weeks. We'll start with Shrita, that will be sharing with us the contents about week 1, week 2, what are our objectives, what are some of the activities and the exercises that we'll be having. And then we'll split into breakout rooms. And the idea here is that as we move into the breakout rooms, you will be able to discuss with your facilitator about those 2 weeks, exclusively about those 2 weeks, week 1 and week 2. Then when we finish the analysis and the discussion of those 2 groups, we'll be moving back to the main room and we'll have an overview by Peja on weeks 3, 4, and 5. Again, we will have a brief discussion of the explanation of the objectives and the contents, and then we'll move again into breakout rooms, and we'll have a space to discuss these 3 weeks, week 3, 4, and 5 in our breakout rooms. And then finally, we'll be coming back into the main room for a brief debrief and conversation about what we just did today. And when we are explaining this and we are talking about this, I just want to name something that is really important. It's the difference between this second co-design session and the first one that we had last week, okay? So in the first session we had last week, the idea was to share our own personal experience and our own points of view about how we live and how we interact and react with the climate crisis. That was last week. Today, we are going to be focusing more on the dialogues, okay? We need to make a little shift in our mind about that. We are not going to be discussing again about our personal experience with the climate crisis. We're going to be talking about what the 5 weeks are going to look like and what we are going to do with them early next year, okay? So it's important that we remember that. This is our second co-design session, as I was mentioning. We will have a third one on December 12th. So thank you everyone for keeping this in your calendars. And our check-in question. We have 2 minutes left in this part of the call. Please, in the chat, let's write, if you consider yourself to be a sunny person, warm, cheerful, optimistic, a rainy person, thoughtful, reflection, or a windy person, energetic, restless, adaptable. How do you consider yourself to be? Are you a sunny person, a rainy person, or a windy person? And please write in the chat. Let me take a look in the chat. The chat, we have sunny person with wind. Okay, sunny person. Okay, we got lots of sunny people here. A tornado, so a lot of wind there. Thank you. Okay, we got more windy person. Okay, a lot of sun, a lot of wind, and let's see. I see one rainy person there, and then we keep the sunny, lots of sun today. Amazing. Let's keep this coming. We have maybe 1, 2 people missing. Let's see. Okay, so all right, we got lots of sun, a little bit of wind, and 1 or 2 drops of water here in the group. Amazing. Rainy and windy. Okay, nice. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so after we did this check-in question, we are moving on to the designing a dialogue part with Dr. Peja, please.
Sam, if you can keep the slides on, that will be great, and advance them. Thanks. Well, it's good to see you all again, and great to see some faces as well. If you can turn on the camera for us to see you, that will be wonderful. If not, that's okay, because we know the lines are sometimes not good. So before we start, the purpose of this section is to give you actually a sense of deeper insight in what dialogues are going to look like and why we're doing them. And I want to start with, if you go to the next slide, Sam, I want to start with this question: what if we acted as though we truly loved the future? And the reason why I'm asking this question and posing this question, because I think as a group of people that we are co-designing these dialogues with, and more importantly, that you're going to be part of them and facilitate. Many of you will be part of it and facilitate some of the groups. I think it's also important, aside from the technical details, to understand how we are approaching this. Like, what is our value system that we're approaching this? As you can see this picture, this is from the Museum of Science here in Boston. And I would say that was the closest of me being in the space. And I don't think I will ever be able to be an astronaut, considering my physical abilities. But even this, like looking at the Earth in this museum of science, really put things in a perspective in what we are trying to do here. And the reason why I asked this question of what if we acted as though we truly love the future, I do feel like it's important to recognize that we are approaching climate resilient immunization. We do act as we believe that it is possible to create one that will be good for the environment and that will be good for the people as part of that environment. And I just want to emphasize the word possible here, because it's not being optimistic and saying, oh, everything is going to be okay, because we don't know if things are going to be okay. But it's also not being pessimistic and saying, oh, everything is going to be awful and there's nothing we can do about it. That's the reality. Because if you think about both of those things, the optimism and pessimism, what they have in common is that they presume that they know what the future will look like. And I believe that nobody does. There's no person on earth who knows what the future will hold and how it will look like. So that's why we want to introduce this idea of possibility of creating a future that we will love that future. And that is different. That is more in the domain of hope, and creating that possibility and approaching the immunization in the context of climate crisis, like as we will call it, climate resilient immunization, is to recognize a possibility of the future that we as people will love. As Shrita reminded us in the preparation for this call, if you expect to rain outside, you better believe that you're going to bring an umbrella with you, because you will need an umbrella if you really hope the rain will come. Or if you expect sun, you need a hat, or like something to protect you. So in the same way, if we do believe that climate resilient immunization is possible, we also need to act from that perspective and think about this. And I want to emphasize that is the approach we want to take with the dialogues, is to listen, to acknowledge the reality, and then also act from a possibility that together we can create a future that will serve us all, if that makes sense. So, okay, enough with philosophy here. Let's move into what the dialogues are going to look like. So let me walk you quickly through the objectives. So what we want to achieve with the dialogues, like with this whole, kind of like work that we are doing together, we really want to kind of like do these 7 things, if you want to put it that way. The number one is to expand the knowledge. And this is like, to help people who are on the call, like, and there will be like 200 plus people with us during these dialogues to understand how climate change affects health and immunization programs. And this is not to kind of like judge them or instill the knowledge in them, but it's just to give them a perspective of what is already happening. And as we witnessed last time we gathered, they have a lot of experience of that already. As this group has an experience, we can assume that people already have an experience. And our job is to give them a connection, to connect the dots, maybe in some places where the dots are not connected, but not to kind of like, teach them and preach them about what is happening out there. So that's the first one. The second one is really to share insights. And when I mean like not us sharing insights, but creating the space for them to share the impacts of the climate crisis on immunization today is really giving everybody in the dialogue that opportunity to share that, and you will see that. The third objective is to learn together what it means to connect with communities and really understand the needs and build trust when it comes to climate crisis, because I think it's going to serve us well as immunization professionals and clinicians to build the trust when there's no crisis. Well, there's crisis already, but how much we can actually invest in building the trust and building that community right now that will serve us later when we need to face with some of those challenges. I think there will be a lot of wisdom among those 200 people. As we witnessed, there's a lot of wisdom in this group from our last session and what we did. So that's the third one. Then the fourth one is about monitoring changes, and that is really, and you will see, developing and hoping to develop a skill and tool to help people monitor and document what is happening in the communities, what is already happening, how is it affecting immunization processes right now, how is it affecting the health of the people, and potentially what we can do about it. So that's number 4. The number 5 is start and begin together to map the stakeholders, because I think it's important to understand that they are players in this work, that we need to understand who they are and how to influence them as immunization professionals. And this might be a surprise for all of us. We might learn together that there are players that we are not even taking into the account right now, that we are not even looking into. And our hope is to discover that with the group of 200 people, to map who are the important stakeholders that you see in your communities, in your countries, in your regions, that could play a role to build a climate resilient immunization in the future. The number 6 is more like number 6 and 7 are probably something that will happen during the dialogues, but also after the dialogues, is to, as a result of these conversations, find a way to kind of like boost and strengthen the readiness and preparedness of countries and regions to deal with the climate crisis. And then finally, amplify the voice of the people, of the immunization professionals on the ground in the larger global conversations about immunization, about climate, and about kind of like a lot of things. And I think the partnership, the Sabin, is committed to do that. I don't want to speak for them, but I do believe that it will be fair to say that is one of the goals and strategic objectives of our Boost community and Sabin Institute, to bring the voices of the immunization professionals to the global conversation about climate crisis and about the future of immunization. So those are the objectives. Let me pause for a second and ask if there are any questions, or also invite our Sabin partners like Bilal or Liz, if you want to add something to this, or if there's anything that I've missed.
Yeah, I can come in for a short comment and just back up what Peja said. I think we're excited to receive feedback from all of you. And I think this session, including some breakout groups, will be a good opportunity to do that. But I think there will be opportunities to share feedback after the session as well, which I think Peja and others will talk about. So we look forward to hearing from you today and then in future as well.
That's great. Vikas, I see your hand, so please speak up. Yeah.
Yeah, hi everyone. First of all, it really is a very, interesting discussion and a lot of point we had in the mind. The area we belong to it has really been affected different kind of weathers, extreme type of weather in the winter and in the summer as well. And it will the points you have rose over here, the dialogue objectives, it really will be very beneficial and fruitful for the area of the people after we get to all these things. uh, the rest of the things are clear, that like expanding knowledge and sharing insight. I was little bit, want to have a little more discussion about the last point, amplify influence, that what exactly we are going to do, or what exactly, the main objective behind it.
Yeah. I love that question, and that's a great segue because we definitely going to have a breakout discussions, and Vikas, like that is the next segment. There's also recognition that as you work with some of us, and there's also a moment
Yeah.
where what's going to be amplified is also depending on that community as well. And our hope is to build the strong community of immunization professionals who can kind of like also together decide what action can be taken together. So not assume that we know all the answers or knowing what the actions should be, but also having that in today's session, like discussing that, but also during the dialogues. Okay, what
Yeah.
what is it that we can do, and
What
what
kind of
what
decision making
needs
you
to
were
go.
say?
Go ahead. Sorry, can you hear me? Did we lose like Vikas?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, you mean to say that it will be kind of decision making, the influencer by the end to take some decisions, which way, what should we have to do after this disaster, after this climate change, after this incident that would have happened.
I would say
Okay,
so. I would say that that is the case. But I see Shweta raising her hand, so I want to invite her to also comment on this as well. Shweta, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add that I think the monitoring bit will be more about which direction we want to take the information and our local context in how we are trying to influence decision makers. On the amplify influence, my only sort of comment was that not only bring immunization expertise to the global climate conversation, but also bring the climate conversation into health spaces. There are a lot of global health convenings that happen that don't understand climate very well. Now we have a wealth of knowledge and expertise from the immunization communities, from the on the ground, because we got a glimpse of that in the previous session. How do we leverage this knowledge to influence some of those global health spaces also? So just the flip side of it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Cool. Great question, Vikas. Let's move on and keep that in mind because I think it's a really important one and like the one that we all get excited as well in so many
thank
ways.
you, Peja. Thank you, Shweta. Thank you.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, Sam, if you can go to the next slide. So let me just briefly, as a placeholder, talk about when we say dialogues, that can mean a lot of things for different people. And we wanted us to get on the same page with this group. What do we mean by dialogue, and what do we don't mean as a dialogue? So what dialogues are and what dialogues are not. So if you think about what dialogues are, from our perspective, it's a space for collaborative learning. It's a space where we learn together. It's not that we are experts and we're going to give knowledge to people or build their capacity. It's the space where we learn together alongside with those 200 people that are going to be part of the dialogues. The second important thing is that it is an opportunity to collect information and build evidence for action. Exactly what Vikas was asking us right now is like, what are we going to do? It's part of that is honestly building the solid ground and evidence to ground our actions in that evidence and not to be disconnected. And again, that is the purpose of the dialogues, is to collect and build evidence that we all can take into the action. One thing I want to say about that is at least on our end as People Power Health, it will be really important after the dialogues to bring back what we've learned, not just to Sabin team or PPH team, but to everybody who participated. And we are planning to have a report that will be shared and people can use. We're designing monitoring tool that people can use. Like there will be other things that we hope we will give to people. So after that, they can actually benefit from participating in the dialogues. So it's not evidence for us, it's evidence for them also to take action in their spheres of influence. And then finally, a space that to provide tools and frameworks. And I want to emphasize this because it's not, oh, we're going to teach you about climate crisis. It's more about there are these things, these lenses, the way you can look at the world that might help you connect the dots in terms of what is happening. And also that will be maybe useful for you to kind of continue collecting information. So it's dialogues are, as I said, like really about learning together, about collecting the evidence together, and then finally looking at the world and using some tools and frameworks to help us understand what's actually going on the ground. What dialogues are not, and this is really important, and maybe that will be easier for some people to kind of, at least for me, it's usually easier to know what it's not, and then I can distinguish from other experiences that I've had before. It's not a training and capacity building thing. We're not intent to, let us train you in this and that and whatnot. Like that is not the goal here. It's definitely not a focus group or research interview where we just want to extract the information for the community without actually being in a dialogue, in a conversation. Because I don't know about you, but I work in public health, and there are many examples where people engage communities and engage, individuals just to extract the knowledge without willingness or openness to give and have a two-way street. So that is not our intent with the dialogues. And then finally, it's not a space to evaluate or judge participants' knowledge and skills. Like we're not gonna, in a classical teaching way, say like, oh, let us test how much you know about the climate crisis or what are the things to know and those types of things. So I hope this is helpful, because as you approach this and as you are going to facilitate and look at the stuff that we have to present here, I hope you will understand how we are approaching this, and that is reflected in the design of the sessions as well. So going to the next slide, Sam, if we can go. So how, this is more technical thing. What we are proposing here is a 5-week dialogues that will start. The dates are not here, but we agreed, and we will let you know the exact dates, but they're starting in February. I think we have a starting date as February 25th, 2025. And then we're going to go for 5 weeks. And each week will cover a different topic. We will start with climate crisis and health overview, as we did last week with this conversation. Then we will talk about the impact and risks, especially on the vulnerable population. Then we will talk about the trust and connection with the community. Then the monitoring, documenting, and storytelling, that includes the tools for monitor. And then finally getting to, what actions can we take? How can we recognize the adaptive nature that we need to take in this process? This is just a glimpse of the high-level overview. But in this session, what we hope to do is to give you a deeper dive into each of these weeks. And first of all, have a discussion. Is this topic relevant? Like is this weekly topic a good topic, or maybe we need to have a different one? And if it is relevant, how the things that we are going to talk about, how we can design them in such a way that will allow you to allow our participants to learn together. So, that is really the intent here. I always like to use what we design here is the sacrificial draft, if that's okay. Something for us to reflect on together, but there's a lot of space for improvement and a lot of space for us to get your feedback and then change the things as before February. And that's the intent here. It's not like, oh, we know that this is the perfect way. This kind of thing was never designed before. So we really want to acknowledge the feedback that you're going to give us. And hopefully, because we're going to work in small groups, there will be a chance for us to actually, for everybody to give feedback and talk and give some perspective on that. So I know I'm at the time. So I will turn things back to Sam, but I hope this gave you like a big picture overview. What are we trying to do here? What is our philosophical approach? And then how are we going to do it? Like, what is our initial sacrificial draft or proposal, how we can do this work?
Thank you, Peja. Okay, everyone. So we will be moving now into the overview, the weekly overview section, where first of all, Shweta will be explaining to everyone what the idea of week 1 and week 2 is. And then we'll be moving into breakout rooms to have a discussion. Then coming back, Peja will explain week 3, 4, and 5, and again, breakout rooms. So Shweta, please.
Thank you, Sam. I would suggest, I would request for the next slide. But basically, week 1 and 2, the way we have designed is more looking at some of the definitions, some of the concepts that in a climate change space that we come across. And one of the reasons we have designed it this way is also because in 2021, we did an assessment, one of the largest assessment of knowledge, attitude, and practices among health professionals in India on climate. And we realized that while there was a lot of enthusiasm and eagerness to translate local evidence that health professionals were seeing, there was very little understanding on what is the policy landscape, what are the opportunities nationally or internationally to contribute in this conversation. So this first week is a bit of that, where we will bring in the basics of climate change, the science, the terminology, some of the national and international agreements that we must at least be aware of, even if we are not intervening, agreements like the Paris Agreement, which we often hear in this space, but what does that really mean? Or what are the national policies that are around that gives us the scope and opportunity to intervene? We will also, and this is again reflecting from the first session, there are experiences of extreme weather events. We will go a little deeper into that in terms of what are those extreme weather or extreme health events because of the climate crisis? How does that affect the health of people and the health systems, and what role do immunization professionals have in coping with that or responding to that? So that's sort of the overview of week 1. Maybe we can go to week 2. And week 2 is sort of shifting that theoretical understanding into a little bit of, it's a mix of theory and some practice. It focuses on vulnerable groups, just identifying in a discussion around who are the specific vulnerable groups and what are their specific requirements or considerations that we must keep into mind. We're also in week 2 beginning to kind of understand public narratives, stories, and values, and we'll have a discussion around our shared values with like one exercise that I think we're quite looking forward to, where we will have a crisis scenario and we will put some of the shared values to test to see what our overall narrative is. So that's a week 2 where we will look at some of the vulnerabilities, some of the real life experiences, and see how it shapes our public narrative and values. Over to you back, Sam.
Thank you, Shweta. Okay, so we are moving on to the small groups. Just to mention this, each one of us will be in a breakout room where it will be really important for us to make really specific comments and thoughts so that the facilitator can take the proper note. We will be recording the sessions, so please be aware of that. We'll be recording the small groups. And we have a series of 2 questions that will be used as a prompt for our discussions. So if we can open the breakout rooms, and we'll see each other in a few minutes. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the main room. Thank you for that amazing conversation. We are going to go directly to the overview of week 3, 4, and 5 with Peja, and back into the breakout rooms.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just, for me, it feels like we had a great discussion in our small group. I hope that was the case in others. I just want to give everybody a round of applause for just amazing start. Before we move on to the next one, because yeah, it's fantastic to hear some feedback, and we get some good feedback already. So keep it coming. That's my point here. I'm going to go quickly through the weeks 3, 4, and 5 to give you a sense of what we're going to cover there. So the week 3, if you go to the next slide, Sam, the week 3 is about how do we address the question of trust, and within the trust, really specifically connecting with communities to build relationships and trust, because we believe that is the critical piece of the climate crisis. We are intending to talk about what will build trust in community, what are the relationships that can help us, connect and be ready for climate resilience, and also start to map the critical relationships within the community that we all need. So it's kind of like that's the idea here. Some of the exercises here you can see one-on-ones, maybe some of you know already, like relationship building, identifying barriers and challenges to what needs to be trusted, like trustworthy, and then collectively mapping some of those community relationships that are important. So you get the point. The week 3 is about the communities and building trust as a prerequisite for our work. If you go to the next slide, Sam, week 4, and I just want to emphasize here that next session in December will be really focused on the monitoring and documenting tool. So we should keep the conversation about this light in this session, because we're going to have the whole session on this. But the idea of week 4 is introducing a way for people, a tool, like a monitoring tool, to document what is happening in their communities, in their work, immunization work already, and how to capture that as an evidence. So if you think about this week will be about enabling our colleagues to envision how we can capture the evidence together about the impact of climate crisis. And we're going to offer a tool there that in the dialogues, we hope to have a discussion and conversation with everybody about the usefulness of that tool, how applicable that is, and to what extent they can commit to actually use the tool in the future. But for now, as I said, we have the whole session in December about this. Well, let's just keep it a really high level for this week. And then finally, the week 5. The week 5 is really talking about the solutions and what it will take to move things forward. And, understanding that climate crisis is not a technical problem, it's an adaptive problem. understanding the relationships and power that different actors have in this, and kind of like mapping together what are those relationships that we need in order to create climate resilience, resilient future. And then also the practice of how do we anticipate what we're going to need for that future that we want to build. And this is where I think, to Vakas's point from earlier, I think this is where the two ideas of understanding what the situation is and really planning the actions for the future, that's where this is going to start to become reality. So again, going back, week 3 is about trust and communities. Week 4 is about how do we document and build evidence. And week 5 is that how do we translate all of that into some potential for collective action, for something that we can do together. Sam, I don't know if you have anything to add, but this was my intro here. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, thank you for that, Peja. We are moving back into breakout rooms. Again, let's engage and let's share, and we'll see each other back in 20 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Hello, we ask that you please join.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for that discussion. Thank you for being engaged in those conversations. I could see the microphones moving all across the screen. Thank you for that. And in our last 6 minutes, we will have a short debrief. I will go first with Peja's group. Peja, if you can share with us in 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, some of the thoughts and ideas that were shared.
Yeah, I can do it in one word. Wow. We had a really great conversation. Just a couple of thoughts. Like we talked about week 1 in terms of what it's just not talking about what is the crisis, but also starting to talk about the solutions as well, and that people will need that. Start to talk about think about literature and capturing what are people reading and sharing that with people as well. There was on the week 2 how we can kind of like really engage the people who are vulnerable in the discussion as well, and kind of talk about that practice, not just talking about who is vulnerable, but like how they can be engaged. In week 3, we had a lot of good insights about communicating, like it's about communication, ownership, shared values that we need to build in as well. The monitoring tool, we had a conversation about what are people using right now, and not a lot is out there, and there's a lot of excitement about actually giving a tool to this group and to others. And then finally, the week 5, we really talked about asking the right questions, so people don't expect us to give them solutions, but actually how we can ask the right questions that will engage them in being part of the solution together. So really exciting, a lot more than I can just do in the 2 minutes right now, but we had a great conversation, and it was really useful. So back to you, Sam.
Thank you, Peja. Shweta, please, how was the conversation in your breakout rooms?
I would also say it was fantastic. We were a little, I mean, I was not very good at time management. So we felt like we had like no time, and then we had a lot of time, and then we did talk a lot. But I feel like, I mean, to be very honest, one feeling that I had throughout the discussion was like 5 weeks is not enough. This has to be a long thing because there's so many fantastic ideas. Like every time I sit in these sessions and I go back, I'm like, oh, we can do this, and oh, we can do that. So and in terms of just two things that for me that's really stood out was in the week one, while we're talking about the crisis, there was this very strong recommendation to also address, like, talk about the root causes of this crisis, because without that, this uh this conversation is incomplete, which I really admire. And I mean, I really appreciate that comment. Of course, there was conversations around in general about pre-reading material, making sure that there are homeworks for, after every session, so that the engagement continues, and that, it's not from one Zoom session to another, but people continue to be engaged. I think what stood out really, really well in after week 5 or in week 5 was that not just ending the session, but going with or having a discussion on a mini action plan. Like, is this going to be just a 5-week engagement alone, or are we going to be engaging in the long term with what are the takeaways? How are we implementing what we're learning over here going forward? So that was like, for me, that was really, really important, because that just, reassures that this is something long term, and there is a lot of advice and guidance from this group about making sure that this continues as a long-term engagement, and people have a plan, they have some some way of checking in and some way of implementing that plan, and seeing for themselves how well it's being implemented. So that was very, very important and crucial for me. And yeah, back to you.
Thank you. And finally, Rita, could you please share a little bit about how was your group?
Sure, thank you, Sam. We had a great conversation in French. Despite the language barrier, we could catch all the big information, and it was really amazing that we get through the week 1 about the barriers and the daily challenges, and how immunization are having a review of what is done and what are the barriers to continue. On week 2, the impact and risks over the, let's say, the vulnerable people, and how to raise the voices of those vulnerable people as participants and also as co-facilitators, since Ed assured everyone that it will be in French. And for week 3, we had a big willing from everyone to use the personal relationship to bring other partners, like the environmental partner, other ministries that are implicated, to bring them to this space. It's not just about health as health workers or immunization professionals. For the documentation and monitoring, we had a brief overview how over COVID, we had this go see what is others are doing in, let's say, other countries. What we need here is something that is tailored to our own context, what we are living on daily basis, and how to have unified this to bring evidence and share this evidence, and it will be unified all over countries, and not only each country alone, but all countries together can work on this, because this is a worldwide community. And for the step of solution, it will be not giving the answers, but in this dialogue, having everyone, their inputs shared, and maybe build a global strategy that could be then tailored to each nation, what are their needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. And well, finally, in my breakout room, we also had an amazing conversation in the first and the second one. Mostly, one thing that I want to mention here is that I noticed that sometimes people started with the second question of what will they do as co-facilitators, and then they went back to what will they do as participants. But yeah, we were talking about the importance of having not only the discussion, but also a conversation about solutions and about what could be done. about bringing stories from the communities, from each of our spaces into the dialogues. We also talk a lot about thinking about what type of communities we have and why each community is different and how we can approach those differences in the best possible way. We also talk about the different ways in which trust can be built and the importance of mentioning that and being very explicit about that. We also talk about going back to some of the challenges and being very specific about how to better approach the challenges that there are in the communities. And finally, in our last, we had a really brief, light conversation about the monitoring tool because we know that next session is going to be focused on that. But there were some great ideas about how maybe some teams, maybe some countries already have some tools. And there was this question about, are these tools, can we adapt these tools after the dialogues? And I mean, the answer is yes. We will be providing a tool, but if there are some tools that are already there, we will love to hear from them and to include those tools that may be already existing and using in the teams into the mix, into the conversation. So this was our second co-design session. I would love to give a big clap and love to everyone in the room for being active, engaged. Thank you for that. We have a great we had a great time, and December 12th will be our next co-design session. So please keep that in your calendars. Let's make time for that. I would like to ask Pedja, if you have a final reflection, a final comment before we wrap up the session, please.
No, I don't have anything. I'm really looking forward to the monitoring tool conversation, and then we will let you know about the exact dates. We have a meeting next week that we're gonna kind of like decide on the exact dates of the dialogues and share that with you immediately, so people can put that on the calendar. It's in February. I know it's far away, but like, people are really busy, and we want to make sure that you have that as soon as possible. Bilal, do you have any thoughts or reflections on your end?
I would just like to thank everyone. I think it's always great attending dialogue with this group, and I would just encourage people to share their feedback. I know that we we didn't have as much time as you would have liked, so maybe Sam, if you want to talk about like how people can reach out with feedback. I know in our group especially that people had more thoughts, so do let us know.
That's right. And then of course we have our WhatsApp group. In the next few days and before December 12th, we will be dropping some questions and invite people to share also some of the reflections that you may have maybe later today or in the coming days. Please share those thoughts in the WhatsApp group so we can save that log, that history in the WhatsApp group and include that into the co-design notes. So thank you, everyone. Have an excellent rest of your day, night, and see you December 12th.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.